starts off Perek Memches. Now remember, what's the deal? The deal is we're learning about the Ahava of Kamayim Apanul Aponim Kin Lev Adam Aladim. That you have to love the Eibush because he loves you. Kamayim, the Rebbe says about Kamayim Apanul Aponim that Faket, the lower a person is, the more he has that Ahava. The further away from Elokus you are, the more you realize that you have to have this Ahava for the Eibush. So in the last two Prakim, the Seis Mem Vav Mem Zayin, the Kamayim Apanul Aponim was based on Hashek and the Shana B'Mitzvah. In Memches Memtes, it's a different kvetch. Kamayim Apanul Aponim is Mitzat Tzimtzum. What he calls Ahava de Chekes Abasa. You'll see in Memtes. The Eibush kvetch sich Tzimtzum Erishin and many Tzimtzumim. So we should kvetch ourselves in Yinfan Eskafia. So he starts off saying that from Ein Sof can't be a world except it will be Tzimtzum. So he begins today's Shir, V'hinei. The details of the Tzimtzum, what and how, Ein Kama can be Europe. It's not the place to explain. Ach derech klal, but in general. He explains the concept of tzimtzum, hein, the idea of tzimtzum in general is, bechinas hesed, the union of blocking, verhelem and hiding, of hamshoch, as the of the drawing out of the light and life, and again, from other places, oid is seviv, and chayes is mamali. Shaloi, yoir v'yum, shalachatachtein, bechinas gil, it should not radiate, and be drawn down to the lower realms in a revealed state. Le'esla, b'shul hashpia bahem, to be revealed, to influence them. To give them life, they should be in a way that they appear separate from Elokus. If there's too much gila, that cannot be. Ki'im, the requirement to affect a creation. That's an oifin of yesh, meyayin. Yesh, of course, means it relates to itself and not to its source, because meyayin is lashon bitmiya, it doesn't see its source. Ki'im, the only way it's possible is if ma'at miz'ed. Ki'im, in order for there to be a world that appears separate from Elokus, because it comes in a way of me'ayin. Man is a question. We don't know which source is because of tzimtzum. That ma'at miz'eid, a small piece, small little ray of eid, v'chayis of light, and life is manifest in the lower realms. There should be limited and with a specific purpose. In other words, shahid, that the amount of light and life that reaches tachtoinim is ha'or, amuet, that's miyeh, the tiny little ray. Umamish kloch shivi, it's mamish insignificant, lagabe bechinas ha'or, blig v'vatachlis, to a light which is revealed, but in a way of infinity, blig v'vatachas, and beyond the purpose. Lag der Rebbe ve'in beineim erech v'yachas klal, ken neida ve'in beineim erech v'yachas klal. There's no measure and relativism between them at all. In other words, tzimtzum doesn't mean achilik in kamos. You're changing a lot to a little because originally you have Ein Sof, and now you have gvul v'tachas, it's incomparable. Okay. And that's what he said before. Ilav Yolo of Ein Sof is B'chal, the union of Ilav Yolo and Ein Sof. 5 lines from the bottom of Samach Zayin and Aleph. Is a shvere zach. What does it mean, Ilav Yolo and Ein Sof? This is one place in Samach Vav, based on a mind from Alten Rebbe, where he explains Ilav Yolo and Eir. Ilav Yolo is usually in Shefa, like Seichel and Midas. In Eir, there's no Ilav Yolo, there's Eir and Moed. There's Helam and Gilui. Ilav Yolo means Div Madreges and Eir. But it's all be'erach one to the other. To have Yesh Me'ayin, the Eir has to be of a totally different Eichus. Kenei da Pirush Milas Erech. As we know, the translation of the word relativism, using the context of b'misparim, of numbers. We want to talk about numbers, you can speak about relative and not relative. She'echad b'mispar, one in a number. Yesh le'erech is still relative, l'gabi mispar elef alafim, when you compare to 1,000,000. Shu chelik echad, mini elef alafim, it's one portion out of 1,000,000. And the same is true of 1,000,000,000 and 1,000,000,000. When you compare one, or even 1,000,000 or 1,000,000,000 or 1,000,000,000, to something that has no numeral whatsoever, there's no relativism to it in numbers at all. Even thousands of millions, which is 1,000,000,000, and myriads of myriads, if you care, it's 100,000,000. It's not even comparable, like one would be compared to Elef Alfi Alafim B'Ribi Devavis. Let's do the math. Yeah, Elef Alfi Alafim is 1,000,000,000. And at Ribo you add 4 more zeros, and at Revavis you add 4 zeros on top of that. So you're talking about 9 zeros plus 8 zeros. That's 17 zeros. I don't know what the number for that is, but one compared to a number with 17 zeros has an erech. And when you compare the one with the 17 zeros to Ein Sof, there's no erech. And the numeral one compared to a one with 17 zeros has an erech. It's totally immaterial, totally irrelevant, it's totally immeasurable, it's totally insignificant. And the Rebbe said, this is Pshat Tzimtzum. Tzimtzum is not a chilik, and Kama is a chilik in Echs. Anayim, Mahus, and Gansen. The Ein Sof is not reduced a little bit. It goes from being Ein Sof to being Gavul. What you would call Chassidus, from Eid Ein Sof to Eid Nishama. Eid Ein Sof is Bligvul, there's a lot of Madregis. Eid Nishama is B'mdid of Agbal. So the Rebbe V'kocha Mamish in a similar way, Bechinas Ha'aram Oat Zu. When you talk about the light, that has to be reduced in order to be involved in creation and sustaining of the lower realms. Hamis labeshes, the translation of the word islapshes is gila, it's revealed. In the higher and lower worlds. Now the higher world means atzilus, v'tzarachia. Lashpiya behem lahachiyezim, to flow into them for the purposes of giving them life. That like gabe erech, when you compare to the measure of eid, agonas and down the light which is hidden and concealed. Gonas means hidden, and nella means hiding. Shehu b'chinas, which is infinite. It cannot be revealed and flow in a useful way, functional way into the world. The b'chinas gilu, in a revealed way, to give them life. This is infinite. But rather it's ma'akev aleim u'mayla, it hovers over them from above. V'nikra sevav kalam, and it's called surrounding all the world. We all heard about sevav kalam 1,001 times, and we always assume that sevav means surrounding, but it's not like that, right? What does it mean sevav and mamali? Sevav and mamali, for the purposes of this discussion, we'll use these words. We'll call sevav kalam and etzem ha'ed, and mamala kalam and gilu ha'ed. Sevav kalam means the light as existing etzem. What does etzem mean? Essence. What does essence mean? Etzem. What does etzem mean? Essence. And if you don't understand, you're supposed to say, whatever. I can't explain it. Etzem means anything in relationship with itself is called etzem. Just like you're called atzmi, yeah? Etzem of Eid Ein Sof means Eid Ein Sof b'yachas to itself, that's all. Gili of Eid Ein Sof means Eid Ein Sof b'yachas el azulos, to something other than itself. And of course, you know the rules of Gili, we've gone over them a bunch of times. Gili means it's going to somebody else. Gili means that somebody else gets it. Which means that Gili means that somebody else determines what you give. Because otherwise it's not Gili.
I'm being Megala, I could be talking, it's being Megala.
No, that's not Gili. That's not Meshuganer. Because Gili means it's ala kli. It's a klal in Seichel and Nushi, but the Chassidus makes it a priority. Gili assumes zulas. Ana zulas neshakin Gili. It's not a real lineage. So Gili means ala zulas, to somebody alien, and that they're getting it. Which leads us to the third and most important rule of Gili, that the one who determines how much the Gili is going to be is not the Megala, it's not the Mashpia. It's the Makabal. Because you can't give somebody what they cannot receive. So Mamala Kalama means Gili to a world which is finite, and the world dictates Kvayachal to the Ein Sof how much it could be given. Sevev is Etzem of Ein Sof. Etzem means it exists in relationship with itself, there is no Zulas, and therefore it has no limits, and there's no levels in Ein Sof and Etzem. It just is.
So how could have any chayes from Sevev?
In terms of experience, none. We don't have chayes from Sevev. The idea of Yesh Man has to come from Sevev Kalaman, but it must come through Mamala Kalaman, it must come by Eifin Shal Helim.
So it can't go through there because it can't decide how much it needs.
Right. Because but you need a Keach Ein Sof for Yesh Me'ayin, it has to be by Helim. And if the Keach Ein Sof would be Begila, the world would simply not be able to exist. So the word Sevev, says the Rebbe, Ve'eina Pirush Sevev, the word Sevev does not mean that it's surrounding, or makif and hovering, in a spatial way, God forbid. There's no notion of makam when you speak about spirituality. Okay? In Ruchnis, there's no such concept of space. The meaning of the word surrounding and hovering a mile from above is not spatial, it's not makam-esque, but rather when you compare to the other revelation of a flow, and the revelation of a flow means not that you're giving, but that the world is receiving. A flow which is revealed in the world. Last line on page 134, that's Samach Zayin Amud Beis. Nikras b'shem halboshe is called by the word halboshe, which is also translated in Chassidus as gilui. Shem mislabeshes be'elam, is revealed in the world. Because the world becomes a garment for the light. The light is mislabish, and the world is a malbush. You have a lot of times in Chassidus that when you use, let's say, your levushim of your nefesh alakis for doing a mitzvah, the neshama is mislabish and the nefesh alakis is levushim, and the levushim become a levush, a malbush for the nefesh alakis. Gehei malbishim, because the world becomes the garment for the gilui. And it has to be in a oifen of masigim, they're able to reach intellectually, able to get a sense of hashpash makab, that the flow that they're receiving, it doesn't overwhelm them. It thus must be contained and limited, and so forth and so on, that the world should be able to receive it. That's such gilui, right? And by the way, just for the record, what's the opposite of islapshus? There's a number of words that would denote the opposite of islapshus. One of them would be ma'avir, that it passes by unchanged, which is used for Sefer Kalam. But another very important word, it's not relevant at the moment, it's just good to know, was the word hashra. Like hashra sashchina.
It's resting, no?
Hashra means manifesting in an unchanging way. Shruya. Shruya is without it has in a prat like hislapshus, which is gili, but mitzad Hashem there's no tzimtzum. Hislapshus means revealed according to the capacity of the makabel, which means that in each case of hislapshus is an even tzimtzum. Okay, it's not clear. It's a lomdis, and it's not to this moment. But shruya means manifest, and perhaps in some way gilui, but no shin. Masha enkin as opposed to when the flow is not revealed, in other words, not contained that the makabel should receive it, because it's infinite. It's blocked and hidden. The world is not able to get it because it's in Ein Sof, and therefore you can't call it hislapshus, which means it's going into the keli, and the keli is becoming a lavush for it, which means gilui. It's called surround and hovering, even though it's just the same place, it's inside the same area. In Mokum. So what's the pshat? Sevev Makev means helam. Hilkach therefore. Now that we established that Sevev doesn't mean around, it means hidden. Or as I said to you earlier, the clause will call it etzem. Light doesn't exist in relationship with itself. It's not modifying, changing itself for the world to be able to receive it. That's Sevev. But Sevev does not mean surround. And Mamale means gil. Hilkach therefore. The words are limited and they have a specific purpose. Nimtza, consequently, we have to say, there cannot be a hislapshus and a gila, a revelation of the Eid Ein Sof, in its true form, in a revealed way. In other words, a gila of Eid Ein Sof cannot be in the world, it would blow it up. A small ray of ha'ora, a diminished ha'ora. Made contracted many times. Now, how many words do you have here? Ma'at, Ze'ed, Ha'ara Mu'etes, Mitzumtzemes, Ma'ed, and Ma'ed. That's V'hirak, Kedei L'Hachayesem, in order to give them revealed life. In a way that's limited with the purpose. And that's Mamalik Halalman. The true light, what we would call etzim, light as it exists by itself, which is B'li Tzimtzum Kol Kach, without that much Tzimtzum. Now, the word Kol Kach throws you off. Because we're assuming so far that Sevev Kalama means B'li Tzimtzum Klal. Here he says B'li Tzimtzum Kol Kach, because the Eid, which is a Metzis, also infant Tzimtzum. In other words, even Sevev Kalama is not Etzem of Eid himself. But we're not going to go into that. Nikra Makav the Sevev is called hidden. Machash Ein Hashbos say Mizgalis. That's the key word, because the flow cannot be revealed B'techem in the worlds. Ma'achash Hein B'chinas B'vatachas, because the worlds are limited and with a purpose. So the Rebbe says, what's the idea of Tzimtzum? To change the Eid Ein Sof, the world should be able to get it. And it's not a Tzimtzum in Kamos, it's a Tzimtzum of Shini HaMahus Lagame, it's Tzimtzum of Echos, because we're talking about B'li Gevol Lagabe Gevol, which is incomparable.